Does it make sense to add Washington State and Oregon State to the Big 12? I can tell you off the front here that if ESPN says it makes sense, then it does. Wherever the money puts them, that's what's going to happen. According to @MHVER3 on Twitter, and I get it. Again, faceless, nameless, who is this guy? But the same guy who's in the forefront of USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten. He reported that April 18th of 2022 with his pinned tweet to show that when this guy tweets something out, he's got enough sourcing to have some relevance. He says West Virginia and a few other Big 12 schools are offering counter offers to Brett Yormark when it comes to the conversation the last week, 2 weeks of a straw poll to add Washington State and Oregon State, who have been in this conversation for a year. Here's what his sources are telling him. The Big 12, if West Virginia gets its way, enters a scheduling alliance with the Pac-2 in 2025. And here's where I think this addition could make sense, the most sense. If ratings in 2025 are satisfactory, then an invitation to join would be extended with entrance fee requirements and a graduated buy-in. Wouldn't be a full share member until the next Big 12 TV contract. Now, part of this, those two schools know they're going to lose money. If they add them to a different conference, they don't get that Pac-12 fall-apart lawsuit money for the duration of when they're supposed to. If they make this move by 2025, they're going to forfeit part of that money. But the question would then be, if you're Kirk Schultz, who's at Washington State and running the ship as the president, do you want to forfeit lawsuit money if it means you have long-term stability in a conference? The answer to that question is certainly yes. So Washington State and Oregon State would be silly not to join a conference, even if it means they are not going to get a full chunk of what they expected from the death of the Pac-12. He continues, Pac-2 will halt all legal disputes with networks during this evaluation period. The entrance fee would be used to offset travel costs for the expanded geographical footprint. So when UCF and when West Virginia have to go to Washington State and play a game in Pullman, Washington, that travel cost is going to be partially paid for, in essence, by Washington State and Oregon State. When the football team at Cincinnati has to fly all the way to Corvallis, they're going to get some sort of compensation in a roundabout way from those two schools to be able to do that. The Pac-2, he says, relinquishes ownership of Pac-12 assets to Big 12 as a condition of joining the conference. This includes all money, media infrastructure, and intellectual property. So again, in essence, that entire Pac-12 fall apart where Washington State and Oregon State get this big chunk and they get the rights and they get ownership of most of the Pac-12 and the assets that are left. That would go to the Big 12's pockets. They would then take over that and in exchange give those two schools the comfort of being in a conference. He says Big 12 CEOs would need to approve a provision that if the conference expands again, there will be at least two additions east of the Mississippi River. If that's the clause, if that's the case, if all of that stands true, why not? Add them. Bring them in 2025, see if it works out. Because, and a lot of people's first response is going to be, well, Washington State, that's just not a very good brand. They're not going to be. No, it is. It is. They had higher viewership than Utah last year. When Washington State's good at football, especially, their last 5 years, they've had higher viewership than a Utah. They've had higher viewership than Arizona and Arizona State. Colorado only beat them out last season because Colorado had Deion Sanders, and for the first 5 weeks, they were sliced bread. Washington State is one of the most valuable Pac-12 schools from a TV standpoint. I know they're in Pullman, which is far away from Seattle. They bring the Seattle market down to Oregon State. They're good at football. They've been winning football. I know that you think back 10 years, they were in that boat with Kansas or a Wake Forest, where you just never, or a Duke, you never really thought about them because they sucked. They don't suck anymore. Both of the teams have been competitive. Oregon State, now I get it, Utah was decimated, but Oregon State blew the brakes off of Utah last season. They've got a good football program, and they could leverage that to get in the Big 12 and make noise. And even if the two schools aren't great in the Big 12, if ESPN is telling you, we're going to make this happen financially, we're going to make this work for you, then at that point, you are basically required as a conference to do it. He also says that the conference is looking at possible TV partnerships with Amazon and Apple regarding TV rights for additional inventory that would be created from new additions. Inventory that would be available if Fox doesn't pick up their option for that inventory. The Big 12 is going east. Clemson and Florida State leaving the ACC is going to leave Virginia Tech or Louisville or Duke on the table. It's going to leave Miami on the table. And not all of those schools are going to be picked up by the Big Ten, and especially not the SEC. So the Big 12 is going to be there. And the idea for expansion right now has been going east. That's going to take a little bit, though. That could take a little bit. We might know more about Florida State and Clemson soon, but until we get the official word from ESPN on what that conference's contract looks like in February of 2025, we might not know until then the future of that league, how that league will stack up, and if that Magnificent Seven that all met together and said we might want to leave, if those schools actually act upon that. If ESPN comes back and says, hey, we're going to add 2 new schools to your conference and give you a really strong deal, a viable deal, they might be able to hold that conference together. That's what a lot of people who aren't me believe. I think with the loss of Florida State and Clemson, especially the way the leadership of that conference has shown itself over the last couple of years, the league is eventually going to fall apart. And when that day comes, the Big 12's in a spot to grab schools to stay alive. Brett Yormark has lobbied for a look-in clause with the College Football Playoff Committee when it comes to a revenue distribution model that has a look-in within the next 3-4 years. The College Football Playoff Committee can all get together in a room and say, hey, we're only giving the Big 12 a 15% chunk of this revenue. We're giving the ACC a 17% chunk. Without Florida State and Clemson, that should flip. Now the Big 12's added Louisville. Now the Big 12's added Washington State. That should flip. This conference should be getting a 22% chunk. This conference should be getting a 20% chunk. At that point, this is about Brett Yormark making more money. And he knows if he wants to be the number 1 conference in the country, and that's what he said. Big 12 Media Days, he came out and said, I want to be the number 1 conference in America. That's my goal. We won't stop till we get there. If that's still the case for Brett Yormark, he knows he is going to have to expand this league. If ESPN says, hey, we'll help you get to that goal by adding Washington State and Oregon State, he's going to add Washington State and Oregon State. Don't be fooled. That will be the case. If the hand that feeds you says do it, Brett Yormark's hands are tied. He's going to have to do it. And I don't think it's a bad thing for our conference because guess what? Everybody is going to a model where they're going to have to fly. I get it. Texas Tech's playing Washington State in Pullman. It's not that fun of a trip, but hey, Texas Tech was already playing West Virginia. And what's the difference in that flight? What's the difference in that flight? Sorry. Texas Tech's already got UCF here. Cincinnati. You've got to fly to places now. That's what we do. West Virginia's been doing it for a decade. Calm down. Coming up, new scheduling idea is just, it's fun, but it doesn't move the needle for me on Locked On Big 12. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel's where I go. Rent was due. Yesterday was August 1st. I love sports. I never want them to stop, but it feels like it's kind of stopped right now. I got the MLB going on and, the Olympics. FanDuel.com. Your place for all things sports betting right now. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster or bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Head to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. You go say, hey, I want Cole Reagan 7 strikeouts. And bam, bam, he gets them. You get money from that, buddy. That's good. You say, hey, what about, could we maybe get a Texas Rangers money line? Yeah, dude, be my guest. Go bet on it. Maybe they'll win. Maybe they won't. I don't know. Cleveland Guardians? Yep, dude, do it. FanDuel.com is where you go for a booster bonus every day, all summer long. FanDuel.com.